What is going on, YouTube? So coming back with my final preview of the day, and that is the UCLA Bruins. Just got finished talking about USC and UCLA, another team with a lot of hype, a lot of talent coming into this year. Maybe not as much talent as USC on the roster, but probably set up for more success, at least in my mind, just because of the ease of the schedule. So UCLA coming off a season of another season of pretty high expectations in which they finished 8-5, third in the Pac-12 South, 5-4 in the conference. So let's go ahead and start with my first of three key players, and the first one is the quarterback Josh Rosen. Obviously, one of the better quarterbacks in college football, in my opinion, a top 10 quarterback in college football, had a very up and down freshman season. He's going to have to be big this year. He doesn't have the same amount of weapons in the receiving core as he did last year. The biggest loss of all, Thomas Duarte, who I think should have stayed for another year, but that's a separate topic. They bring back Darren Andrews, Eldridge Massington. Darren Andrews, the leading receiver from last year, then Theo Howard, a 4- or 5-star recruit coming into college, should be part of that top 3 in the receiving core for this year. My second key player is a guy coming off a torn ACL in 2015, and that's Eddie Vanderdoes. Should be leading the UCLA defense and the defensive line. Defensive line that loses Kenny Clark, which is a big loss. The All-American went into the draft, ended up being a first-round pick. I think this defense still has a lot of talent left on it, though. I'll get into it with my next player with the linebacking core. But Vanderdoes is going to be very key in leading this defensive line. He's a very, very good defensive tackle. Should be a first-round pick in 2017, and then will be starting alongside Takaris McKinley and Eli Anku. So it should be an interesting year. Outside linebacker has not really been determined yet for UCLA. I believe that's still one of the bigger position battles on the team. But my third key player for UCLA is the guy who should be leading the linebacking core, and that's Jayon Brown. Coming back, starting alongside Deion Hollins and Kenny Young. Like I said, the other linebacker spot seems to still be to be determined. But Jayon Brown, the leading tackler, like I said, for UCLA last year, might be heading into the draft after this season. Not really sure about that yet, but again, he's going to be key alongside Eddie Vanderdoes. They will need to be good leaders along this UCLA defense because the strength of this UCLA defense, at least in my opinion, is probably the secondary. Randall Goforth, one of the better safeties in the Pac-12, will be able to lead somewhat of a younger secondary, Jaleel Wood. On the other end, a safety, which will be starting as a true freshman. So get into my 2 X factors, first of which is the offensive line for UCLA. If they want to have a successful season, they're going to have to replenish this offensive line that really did lose. They lost a lot in the way of talent, losing 3 starters. Caleb Benenoch will be leading the offensive line alongside Connor McDermott, Kenny Lacey, the new starter at left guard. They are going to have to find a center and a right guard pronto if this offensive line wants to be successful. I'm not saying it's going to be bad. They still have a lot of talent left on this offensive line. Caleb Benenoch and Connor McDermott, I would assume, will be draft picks. Caleb Benenoch will definitely be a draft pick in 2017 if he decides to declare. Excuse me. So my second X factor for UCLA is meeting expectations. This is the biggest thing that has eluded them really since 2013. They've never really lived up to expectations any season individually in the last 3 seasons. Again, last year, somewhat of a disappointment when it looked like at one point they were number 6 in the country. It looked like they could definitely have competed for a Pac-12 South title. So my trap game for UCLA is Arizona State. I believe a game that they lost last year, and a game that while Arizona State will not be as good as they were last year, at least they're not assumed to have or to be. Definitely a team that's still going to provide a challenge for UCLA, especially considering this game will be on the road. Now, when you're taking into account UCLA schedule, I mentioned this earlier, they do have a little bit easier schedule than some of the other Pac-12 South teams. The hardest team they have to meet from the North is Wazoo, and then they also get a Pac-12 North game against Oregon State. So that'll help them out a little bit as well. Like I said, a team that is going to have to win all the games they're supposed to win this year. That's just part of the living up to expectations thing. So my biggest game for UCLA is USC. I mentioned this earlier. With USC, this will be, at least in my opinion, the deciding game for the Pac-12 South. Obviously, there's a few other games that will be key for UCLA. Like I said, I think Arizona will compete for a Pac-12 South title, at least a little bit, and I do think that USC will give them a tough ride because USC does have an extremely tough schedule, and I do think that that's something that will just power them forward. Obviously, USC, the most important game of the year for both teams. So my record prediction for UCLA, this is probably very optimistic, but I think they are going to go 12-2. I think this is a team that will only lose one game in conference. They don't really have that tough of an out-of-conference schedule. They do have to travel to Texas A&M and BYU, but I think both those games they can handle. And then I think their only loss in conference will be Stanford, and I think they will end up losing to Stanford twice and then end up getting a bowl win after. Obviously, it's hard to trust them in bowl games after they lost to a 5-7 Nebraska in their bowl game last year. But again, I think that Josh Rosen is ready for another year of maturity. I said it was a very up and down season for him last year, but he did get better as the season went along, got more consistent as the season went along. And I think this team's got a lot of talent returning at quarterback, running back, and then also they've got some very good players returning along the defense. I think they've got leaders at every level. I think Darren Andrews is ready to step up and be that wide receiver, or be that star wide receiver that they're going to need this year. And I think something that I didn't really mention too much in this video, but is very big for UCLA, is their running back depth. Nate Starks and Soso Jamabo provided good depth behind Paul Perkins last year, and it will be their backfield for the taking this year. So that pretty much does it. Like I said, this is it for my college football previews for today. I will be coming back tomorrow with Kansas State to start off the day, so moving back into the Big 12. But that's pretty much it. See ya.